Digital art for me has been something that has helped me find my art style and experiment in a way that allows me to erase mistakes easily and to just quickly add on to how I want to do art. And it's allowed me to build up my technique as well as allowed me to easier find my art style. And today's video is going to be about how I use Procreate for my art personally and how I think it can be helpful in developing your skills. Okay, so when you first load up the app, you're going to see a lot of different like brushes and things you can use. So you have the sketching compartment, the inking compartment, which is what I'm calling the brush libraries, drawing, painting, artistic, calligraphy, etc., etc., etc. Right? So all of these different things allow you to properly do your art, right? So a big favorite of mine is I like to use the Procreate pencil for line art because I think that it adds a nice, it's just nice in general. Then I like to go into some inking if I'm feeling, like I want to do that day. And I think that painting on Procreate is also particularly easy. I like to personally use the flat brush. What you can also do is make your art look more unique through the use of changing the brushes on the blender and eraser tool. So for the blending tool, what I like to do is use a flat brush, or sometimes I use the jagged or wet acrylic, because I think it adds quite a unique look to your piece, right? So Procreate, and I think digital art as a whole, is quite versatile in how you can use it, because you can use the different brushes and the different types of blenders and erasers to really create a unique piece of art, right? I think that's quite helpful. So another thing that's really important to know is that you can use lots of layers. I think that when we do traditional art, a lot of us get really like we're quite constricted by the layers, right? There's no room for experimentation because it's not very easy to erase things, especially if they're in color, right? It doesn't always erase properly unless you draw really lightly, which sometimes just isn't how you want to do it, right? Sometimes you want a darker, richer color as opposed to just a lighter color that's easy to erase. And I think that what the layers do is they allow us to experiment more. Something I quite like doing is I draw like a sketch on one, then I start doing different colors on different layers because it allows me to toggle things off that I don't like, as well as change shading, right? So if I can do base colors on one layer, and let's say I want to shade it on another layer, then I can, Um, yeah, which I think is quite helpful because it means I can toggle it off, I can check if I like it, and how the original looked. So it allows you a lot of experimentation, which I think is quite helpful. Another thing that I find quite helpful on Procreate is the fact that if you press the adjustments button, that is the kind of pen with with the glowing things, there's different blurs, right? So this kind of just speeds up the process, right? Okay, I'm doing a circle right now, which is not a very pretty circle, but if you do the Gaussian blur, see how it blurs it out, things like that. It's just an easy way to add a bit of blur to your photos if that's the look you're going for, right? I find it particularly helpful in backgrounds when I do bother to draw them, as well as just shadows if I'm too lazy to blend them out myself. Okay, so what else, right? So as we can see, there's lots of different adjustments that you can make. So there's the hue, the color, the curves, distortion, gradient map, etc. I personally like to keep it simple with how I set it up. Yeah, another helpful thing about the digital art is the freehand, right? It's like the toggling tool where you can circle things. It allows us to move things around, and sometimes it makes it easier for coloring as well. Now, something I didn't originally know that I could do in Procreate. So if I go to a drawing, I'll have to edit this part out. You can actually just kind of toggle layers off. This isn't really a drawing, it's a color palette kind of. But okay, let's do that on one layer, and then I'm going to do another circle in a different layer. Or like just add something. You can actually tap on it, and you get different things, and it's like the different toggles, and this allows you to change the color. But something I didn't know at the start was that if you tap on the photo itself, not on the layer button, or like on the N, something that you can do these different things like alpha lock, mask, clipping mask, etc. What I quite like to do is alpha lock, and it allows me to kind of change the colors, right? So I think that's very helpful because it means that you cannot go over the lines you've previously made. So I find it very helpful when I color in something. It allows me to just color block and then edit later. But now To go along with the layers thing I said earlier, where it's good to have lots of layers, you can also have clipping masks. So the clipping mask, then it won't move. I can't move further than that. So if I do, let's do blue. I can't go further than there, right? Which makes it helpful because it means that you can't color outside the lines and allows you to experiment with numerous layers, which is quite helpful. Except it only works for layer under it or the layers that are in groups together. To group layers, you just kind of drag them together and it forms new groups. I would suggest renaming the groups because it just makes it a lot easier. Yeah, so that is that with at least this portion of the digital art video. Another thing that I neglected to mention was the fact that you can also color pick, right? So if I tap the square button, you can also tap and hold on the screen, like with your finger, and then you can color pick. But I find it easier to tap the square thing in between the size toggles, and that allows you to choose a color, which just makes it slightly easier. You can also pick the layers, which is just cool if you like tap and hold. Yeah. So that's how you do that part. But now that we've gone over how I do some basic toggles, let's then go over how you can actually start with your art piece, right? So something that I enjoy doing is I like to find references. So as you can see on this drawing that I've done, I went and found references. I found this rose dress, these shoes, and then I liked the hair and colors in this. This piece isn't done, by the way. So what I did in this piece then was I went and I found the references and I started drawing from there. I also found a pose reference, but I think I accidentally deleted it. Yeah, but see, I find that quite helpful. So something I like to do is I like to go to Pinterest. So I like to start off by going to Pinterest as I'm typing in now. I'll select a couple of references. I like to open this over here. Let's go into the untitled artwork. And something you can do is just go straight from here and then you download the images. Yeah, which I find quite helpful. Then from there, you go modify, you press on the actions bar, and you can insert a photo. Well, if it would load, then you could insert a photo. Yeah, so we're going to insert that, and then I can start, copying the pose, sketch, etc. I like to just do that, for my references. And I find it quite helpful, especially now when I take art as a subject, because it means that I can plan my art pieces digitally and then start copying it onto paper later, just easier access because I feel like it's easier to see my references next to what I'm drawing as opposed to having them on an iPad and I have to constantly look up onto the paper. So I like to sketch little ideas first. Gerald, what are you looking at? Digitally first. Okay. So there's also a lot of different settings, right? So you can do animation assist because you are able to animate on Procreate. Page assist, which I don't actually use that much, and well as a drawing guide, which gives you grid lines, which I find quite helpful because it also does them for your references. Another thing that you can do is set a reference. So you press the reference button, you can go image, import image, and then you have a reference that moves around with you, and you can like move it. I think there's a way to resize it. I just struggle to resize the block, but I'm in my struggle era. But yeah, so I find that quite helpful, when I'm creating a piece. So more than that, what I like to do is I also just generally like to experiment, right? So through all the different pieces, this I never finished, but it was just character designs because it's nice to be able to just do character designs and be able to fix my mistakes. That was a real comic that I was planning. Never did it though, because I am lazy. Oh god, don't look at that, please. Yeah, so I think that this is quite a good app, and I think that digital art really allows people to get into art where they normally wouldn't, right? Because it can be done on the go. Although I don't often use my phone to draw, I used to. I have an app called Sketchbook on my phone, which is free, unlike Procreate, which costs money. It's quite simple to use and allows you to really experiment with your art and to just, you know, do it right, if that makes sense. It allows you to really just look at what you're doing, um, and to experiment with your style. I think it's quite fun. It also makes sketching a little easier. It's quite difficult to carry around a big sketchbook constantly and move around with it, pull it out whenever you go. Although that can be nice to do, it's just not always accessible. You don't always have the time or the space to do that. So I think that sketching on your phone or sketching on your device makes it a lot easier and can just be a lot of fun. You know, you can sketch on the go, and it doesn't have to take up a lot of space in your bag because people would normally carry their phone or a device with them. So as you'll be seeing on the screen over here, here is a piece I did, which I quite like, although it is heavily stylized. Just let my style be, please, possibilities. You can see that I've done lots of layers. So I added a splash layer using the different brushes. And this for me was just experimenting with my style, right? So I use sketches to outline and I put them all on different layers because I think it just allows me to really just practice and do what I want. You can see here that there are my references that I did. Here is the pose. I traced this pose just to make it a little easier for myself, not very well. Let me see if I can get a few by turning off all these toggles. Yeah, so that's the pose. So that'll add these back. You can see I did all the coloring on one layer because sometimes I find that a bit easier, but most of everything else is done on separate layers. As far as I know, I haven't personally reached the max layers on Procreate, but I know that there is a max. So just don't go too ham with the layers because you might find yourself being stopped. But I'm not quite sure where that limit is. So I can put it in the description of the video though. Yeah, so I just find that the process of art, you must keep it light, keep it fun. Don't take it too seriously because you are able to make mistakes and it's not as life or death. And I think that digital art provides a space where you can really experiment with your style, as I've stated earlier. Yeah, so I just think that's a nice intro to Procreate. It's the things that I personally like to do with my art, my recommendations for how you can be doing it. But I'm just making this video because a lot of people don't I don't think utilize digital art enough, you know? It's just such a versatile program that you can really create anything on it. Yeah, because you aren't limited by a lack of colors or a lack of pens and paints because a lot of the brushes come free with the app, and there are a lot of different apps you can use. I personally experimented with many different ones before I settled on Procreate. And the only reason I settled really on Procreate was because I liked its easier interface. But I think that apps like Sketchbook can be just as easy when using them, right? And I just think that it's a lot of fun to do digital art. So this is my recommendation to just, explore digital art, have a little bit of fun with it, because a lot of the apps are free, and I think that it can really be nice to experiment. Okay, thank you. Bye.